This segment, I am going to be talking about the capital expenditure. I am in the UPA era, in the Manmohan Singh regime, and I talk about the capital expenditure in the Modi regime, and besides that also about the forex. We also are going to be speaking about the policy paralysis, the big charge made by the BJP on the Congress under the Manmohan Singh governments in the two terms. Let's start my conversation over here. I have with me my panelists. Let me quickly introduce them to you. All right, starting off with Dr. Jayji Bhattacharya. Dr. Bhattacharya, particularly with regards to the foreign exchange and what has been provided in terms of the statistics by the government of India is that the foreign reserves that were at a healthy 1 billion US dollars. Okay, so it has been reduced to 100. Okay, I'm just going to correct this figure. Okay, the fact was that there has been a significant chunk of forex reserves that had been handed over to the UPA government after 2004, and which was being handed over under the Vajpayee era, and that amount had been considerably reduced to our foreign exchange, lasting us just about a week, and it has shown back a resilient uptick in the Modi era. What is foreign reserve a reflection of for a country?
So the foreign reserve, kind of reflects a lot of things. Basically, it reflects to an extent the strength of the country in terms of exports and in terms of its ability to fund exports in the future. It is not necessarily that we should accumulate a large amount of foreign exchange just for the sake of it. It's not something fashionable. But what it helps in is to assure that you have enough money to be able to import essentials such as possibly food, oil, and so on and so forth. And typically you keep 6 months as the forex buffer that you need for imports. And what had happened, and I think we should revisit 1991 over here, which is where we were at an abysmal level where we had only about 6 weeks of money left in terms of foreign exchange for being able to fund our imports. And it was a critical situation. We were going bankrupt. Pretty much we were going the way Pakistan or Sri Lanka has gone. And therefore we had liberalization. But the question doesn't come up as to why we reached that level. What happened because we reached that level is because the previous politicians, I'm not a political expert, but from an economic perspective, they kept pandering to the masses. There was VP Singh, and then there was Rajiv Gandhi from two different political parties who were both from one party, and then they split. And they competed against each other to open up the coffers and give freebies to people. And in that competition between them, we ended up finishing up all at treasury. If you cut to 2014, we had about $100 billion as forex. That's what the Vajpayee government left. So in about roughly 10 years' time, we went from almost zero to 100 billion. And then in the next 10 years, we could hardly do double up that forex. And from there till now, we see we have got $600 billion plus. So 6 times the foreign exchange went up from 2013 to 2014. That just shows how strong the economy is, how our goods and services are needed all over the world. And that has happened because being backed by the government to ensure that we get a very strong industry without which these exports would never have happened.
Okay. All right. So now I just found this particular paragraph where in the white paper which says that under the UPA era, the foreign exchange reserves declined from around 294 billion US dollars in 2011 to 256 billion US dollars in 2013. By the end of 2013 September, the forex reserves were just enough to finance little over 6 months of the imports, down from 17 months. That was in March 2004, which was under the Vajpayee era. So, what were the reasons that this foreign reserves reduced so drastically?
So it's the same, if you look at what's even happening in many of the states where the new pension policy is being replaced by the old pension policy, which is nothing but a freebie, take it for free. Now we know there's nothing which is free. So when you start having these policies, you deplete your foreign exchange also, because you're not collecting enough taxes, but you want to give things away on a freebie basis. When you're doing that, you're not having enough exports, and which is why you end up depleting
What?
your forex reserves.
What?
Yes,
Can I
Nikhil,
please
what is it?
respond?
I'm talking to an economist who's giving me a
And
fair analysis of what the forex means.
please
How does
have
a
him
government,
explain.
how does a country work on forex reserves? If you have a point to make, please make it fairly instead of mocking my guest.
2004, 2004, the forex reserves in India were $100 billion. 2014, they were $300 billion. He's conveniently talking about a $30 billion decline in 2 years. He's not talking about the $150 billion increase in 7 years. Number one. Number two, how in the world does giving pensions to government employees reduce the forex reserves? I am an illiterate in economics compared to him, of course. Please have him explain to your viewers how does giving pensions to people in India in Indian currency reduce the forex reserves, that foreign exchange reserves that the Indian government or the Indian system have. Please explain that.
Yes, Dr. Yes, Dr. Bhattacharya. Yes,
Yeah,
please
so
go
a
ahead,
couple of
Jayajit
things.
Bhattacharya.
Yeah, a couple of things. This is the first time I'm seeing somebody interjecting in an unparliamentarian manner. That's quite unacceptable. Second is data is wrong. 2013, the foreign exchange reserves was 270 billion and not 300. Third, he should understand that when you start giving money without any return coming in, you lead to inflation. Can you please ask him to stop flashing his screens and so on? Now, as any economist who has done 101 of economics will know that when you are giving away money for free, you're leading to inflation. When you lead to inflation, the exchange rate of your currency depreciates. When your exchange rate of your currency depreciates, you will have to pay more to import the same thing. So everything that we were importing costed more, which is where the foreign exchange started depleting. When you got a series of actions, when you're giving away your Indian money free, because that's what is being said, you print Indian money, you give it for free, so there is no impact on foreign exchange. That's a very simplistic argument that that should not even be entertained on a national channel. The moment you have free money being given, you get inflation. The moment you have inflation, it reduces the exchange rate of your currency, and therefore you need more forex to import anything that you need to import.
Okay, fair enough. And I hope Nikhil has gotten his answer. I'm going to quickly go to Gautam Mukherjee. And Gautam, talking about foreign exchange and capital expenditure, and particularly with regards to the kind of subsidies that had been provided by the UPA, particularly at the end of its 2014 stint in a bid to win elections, and that's very reflective of the budgets that had been announced, particularly by P. Chidambaram in the two terms that were the interim budget terms. Now, how does this end up impacting the capital expenditure? How does this end up impacting the opportunities for jobs, opportunities for employment, opportunities for building infrastructure and structural reforms in our country?
Well, if you're not generating money, you have less. And if you have less, then and you're spending money like an open tap, then your fiscal deficit goes up. Your right now, if you notice what the RBI is up to, it's trying to reduce it from 5.9 to 5.1 and then on to 4.5 in the fiscal deficit percentage-wise, which is the target. What this does is strengthen the economy because your borrowings are going down, and they've also, in fact, cut back currently on government borrowings for infrastructure, which is the big growth driver and has been the growth driver ever since 2014. In order for the private sector to take up some of the expenditure. Now, all of this is good fiscal management. If, on the other hand, you are pardoning loans of 60,000 crores just before the elections to the farmers, then you are giving it away in a reckless manner, hoping to replicate what you did for the election before that, where it did work for you. Whether it was the only factor that worked for you, we don't know, but it was employed before, it was employed this time, and it didn't deliver the results. I'm talking about the 2014 elections, as far as the UPA went. Now, the UPA has a tendency to not worry about the income side of the ledger and is very active on the giveaway side of the ledger. Not productive welfareism, but just give it away. Give everybody so many thousand rupees. Give promises of free this and free that. Aam Aadmi Party is along the same lines. Aam Aadmi Party is just as bankrupt. It doesn't work. It's old-fashioned socialism. It bankrupted an oil-rich country like Venezuela. It can even bankrupt Saudi Arabia if you just keep on doing it on the one side of the fence and not on the other. This is what it means.
Okay. All right. Now, Nikhil, how do you at this point in time justify that the capital expenditure under the UPA continued to go down and very rapidly?
First of all, Megha, I'm not quite sure when we're talking about capital expenditure, how is credit being given to farmers a matter of concern. Secondly, when we praise Prime Minister Modi, and rightly so, for having the Mudra loan scheme and giving cheap credit to people in the economically marginalized sections of the society, I don't understand how giving credit to farmers is a problem. Secondly, I don't really understand how is giving pension to government employees printing free money. Thirdly, on the topic of subsidies is something that is a measure of social welfare, which the Bajpayee government did, which the governments before that did, which the UPA did, and which the Modi government does. So when Modi government is giving free ration to 80 crore people, that is subsidies, and that is good. That is social welfare. When the UPA government gave ration for 1 rupee a kilo or 2 rupee a kilo, that is subsidies, and that is good.
I'm saying, can the government maintain a capital expenditure that is then for structural reform of the country? And make a comparison, and what kind of infrastructure has been built that is required for thriving, making the economy a thriving one, versus what has been done under the UPA era? What kind of infrastructure reforms were being brought in? What kind of
Megha, during the UPA era, the growth rate was
I'm just quoting the figure. I'm not even saying BJP is right. I'm not saying the Congress is right. I'm just going to point figures at you, and that's exactly what I'm going to say. And I think figures speak a volume, right?
And the figures speak that there was a higher growth rate during the UPA era. The growth rate in the forex reserves was higher during the UPA era. My figure of $300 billion was challenged by a panelist earlier. I am reading from an Economic Times report dated 9th July 2014, which quotes the Economic Survey 2014, which says that we had forex reserves of $304.2 billion. Which is 3 times what the UPA government took to power in. So the forex reserves were increasing at a higher rate than the Modi government. The growth rate was increasing.
So which figures should I believe? Should I believe the figures that have been put in by the white paper by the finance minister of our country, or at this point in time, should I believe the figures that have been put in by the Economic Times?
Economic Survey 2014 is also a Government of India document. What kind of post-truth world are we living in if we start questioning everything? Economic Times is not credible. Washington Post is not credible. Government of India before 2014 is not credible. But this Brazilian political government,
the capital expenditure of the total expenditure of our country from 2003 to 2004 was 31%. It reduced to 16% in 2013, 2014. It then went to a high of 28% in 2023, 2024. So it is now sort of had the semblance of being at the same level that it was in 2003, 2004.
We had a global recession in 2008.
I don't know. I will have to take a look at that Economic Times article, because at this point of time, you are reading out of it. I do not have access to it. So I will have to see it with my own eyes to believe it. Right now, what I'm saying is that the white paper by the Government of India, which has all the figures, it cannot fib, it cannot lie, it cannot twist, is in front of my screen.
No, Are my figures being challenged? If they are being challenged, I can give
all
authorities
I'm saying
also
is
for
I
that.
would like to look at it before I then make a comment.
Then please
Make
do
a
look at it,
comment on whether you are
I
in
don't like
fact
to throw figures in the air.
giving me the right
I don't
figures
like
or
to throw
not.
figures in the air. Every single figure, Megha, I'm being very honest with you. Every single figure that I've quoted on your channel right now, I am Googling that from authority sources right now. I am not an economist that I have these figures at the back of my head. I only speak a given figure only when I have read it on an authority source, and I have
Dr.
given you the source for
Bhattacharya,
the
so then
300.
I don't know.
300 billion. That is
Are we
why I
talking
gave you
on
the source for the $300
technicalities?
billion.
Economic
I
survey that
genuinely
was
understand.
released in 2013, 2014, as has been mentioned by 2013, 2014, as has been mentioned by Nikhil, saying that the forex increased to 300 billion US dollars as opposed to what the government of India in its paper has released.
Government of India.
Jayajit Bhattacharya, yeah.
This is the first time I'm seeing a shouting match on your channel, which was, which was always a very level-headed channel. Anyways, having said
Well,
that,
I'm trying to have a reasonable conversation over here. Yeah.
absolutely. I appreciate that. Now, at some point in time, 300 billion was touched in UPA, but it promptly went down. And when they handed over the regime to the next regime, it was at 270 billion, if not lower. So at the end of 2013, it was 270. It slid even further after that. So putting figures out of context is not the correct thing to do. Even when we say that one of the highest growth rate was achieved in the UPA era, which is true in terms of the number, but the context was that before that there was a global depression, and along with it, India did extremely badly. And so on the back of a very low growth, we were able to get a higher growth the next year. So all of these have context to it. In terms of the, if you look at the percentage growth in Forex, because that was the number being challenged. And I hear the co-panelist kept saying he does not understand economics and still insisted on explaining economics. So if one spends money in Indian rupee, he's wondering how Forex gets depleted. I've tried to explain multiple times. I'll explain that again. When you spend money in rupees without producing anything, then it leads to inflation because you're pumping in cash without any productive assets getting created. When you do that, then your rupee gets weakened in terms of foreign exchange rate. When your rupee gets weakened, you'll have to spend more dollars to buy anything that you need in this country, and which is how you start depleting your foreign exchange.
Absolutely.
In terms of, we were at $100 billion in 2004, and in end of 2013 we were $270 billion, and it went further down. So in terms of increase, we had a 2.5 times increase between 2014 and 2013. Post that, we are now at around 606, $610 billion, which is a 3.5 times increase in forex. So these are straight multiplication. You don't even need to do an economist to do these multiplications. So in every aspect that you see, there has been a significant change that has happened. Let me take more deeper examples which were not reflected in the white paper. Let's just take, for example, penicillin G. The industry kept asking for an anti-dumping duty on penicillin G, which was denied. And many of these were CPSUs, they were public sector companies. And the Indian government they bought penicillin from Chinese companies, and at a price that was half of what that the Indian companies could produce. And it finished off the Indian companies, and then the Chinese companies jacked up the price by 8 times. Now this government is spending 15,000 crores to get these penicillin G companies back on track through the PLI scheme. If you look at even the gap in terms of our trade with China, in 2004, the gap was about 2,000 crore. About $1.4 billion was the trade deficit between India and China in 2004. In 2013-14, it ballooned up to $36 billion, 25 times. Why did that happen between 2004 and 2014? Why did the trade deficit balloon from $1.4 billion to $36 billion with China? What was so friendly about China that we allowed this? There are examples after examples that we show, which is inexplicable as to why a government which is running India for the benefit of India, Indian businesses, and Indian citizens took steps which were not really helping out any of these stakeholders.
Okay, all right. I think that's clear as day. Quickly coming to Gautam Mukherjee as well, and I hope Nikhil has been able to, all his questions have been answered by Dr.
They have not
Bhattacharya.
been answered.
To
You've just
the
twisted things
to
in an,
the
in
to
an
the
economy. Everything is related.
I'm sorry, Nikhil. I will
Sarcasm is
not give
clearly
you.
something
I
that he
will
doesn't
not give you
understand.
more time on the
And I think
platform
I'll
right
have to
now.
leave
But
from a
Gautam Mukherjee,
panel that is
an overall
disbanded.
picture now in terms of the statistics that have been shared. We talked about forex and capital expenditure particularly. How do we then go ahead from here? Now that there has been a fair amount of understanding that has been projected over after the comparisons that have been built, how does the Government of India, BJP, move forward in its initiative to further improve the economy here on?
Well, the biggest item in the interim budget was the capex, the government capex projection, which was passed at some 11.1 lakh crore. If it had kept pace with the year before, it would have been 13 lakh crore. Now, so it reduced itself slightly and offered that in a manner of speaking to the private sector. Now, looking at how Adani, Ambani, and Tata for sure will come forward, this is a tiny amount and they will probably exceed it. Other companies would come. There are quite a few, L&T, and so on, various companies which are already working with the government. So we have the roadmap for the next 5 years is to keep the momentum without losing sight of the fiscal deficit, which is inflationary if it keeps growing. So that is being tightened. The latest RBI guidance left the interest rates unchanged, i.e. they did not reduce them, though we are now on a holding pattern for quite a while, a year or so, and eventually interest rates will reduce, which will again boost liquidity in the economy and provide more money for growth. But that's not yet. That's not yet, probably not for quite some time, because the inflationary pressures, both domestically and more importantly internationally, are quite threatening. So we are following a pretty prudent fiscal course, and as a consequence, other things being equal, i.e. no major black swan event, we will do 7% year on year for the next 5 years.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.